Oh, hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's bit of our story. Today, we're actually pretty much halfway through with our story. Actually, after today, we actually will be at the halfway point chapter-wise. I think there's 30 chapters here, and we will be on we'll end on chapter 15 today. This is still Surviving the Applewhites. What we're doing today, don't forget, Surviving the Applewhites. Brought to you by AR Accelerator Reader. Making reading fun for years. I don't know. This is test number 60652. Although we're not at that point yet, but maybe you've gotten the book already. You've read it. I don't know. But there's we are. So 5.5 level book, or a little 5.5 according to AR. And it is worth 7. A whopping 7 points. We'll put that in 3D. 7. Woo! 3D. Let's see. When we left, let's see what all has happened. Let's see. We got Edie. We've got Jake. Jake's having to deal with Destiny all the time. Destiny is my favorite character to read his dialogue. I love reading Destiny dialogue. And sometimes I get a little whenever I kind of mess something up because I like it. He has so many questions, and I feel so connected to Destiny. If there was a character I connected with most, I think it's Destiny. How about you? If there's a character that you connect with most, put it in the comments or put it in the chat. Who do you most connect with? For me, I'm Destiny. Yeah, I'm Team Destiny, which is crazy that the 43-year-old man connects most with the 4-year-old boy, but that makes sense. That's where I am mentally. Just ask Stella. That being said, reading position. Chapter 13. Edie was alone in the schoolroom, sitting at the computer with her hands pressed over her ears. Jake and his canine shadow, Winston, had gone into Treybridge with Archie to get some supplies for the wood shop, and Lucille had taken Destiny along to the library. Jeremy Bernstein was still staying in Dogwood Cottage. He had decided to write a book about what he insisted on calling the Applewhite Artistic Dynasty. And he had been practically monopolizing the schoolroom computer, working on the book and exchanging emails with his TV friend, trying to arrange a documentary about them all, or a story on a magazine show at least. But he was out in the woodshop now. It was a chance to get online and do her math, except that she couldn't concentrate. Edie had always thought you could get used to sounds the way you get used to smells after a while. Sensory fatigue, it was called. You would get so you didn't notice anymore, like Destiny's nonstop chatter. She told Jake it was like getting used to a refrigerator motor. And she'd been right. Everybody got used to Destiny. You couldn't survive in this family otherwise. But this was different. This was worse. Much, much worse. This was torture. She'd heard somewhere that when the cops or the FBI or somebody had wanted to end a siege with a militant cult, they'd beamed a rock and roll music at them from high-powered speakers. She could understand why it would work. Only they shouldn't have used rock and roll. They should have used the sound of music. It would have been faster. After 24 hours, the people in the cult would have laid down their guns and come out on their hands and knees, eyes as crazed as wolfies, singing compulsively about female deer and kitten whiskers. For 5 days now, her father had been playing the CD of The Sound of Music all day, every day. He said he needed to totally immerse himself in the musical ambiance of the show. So everybody was being totally immersed in the musical ambiance of the show. Her mother had begged him to use earphones, but he refused, of course. They not only destroy your eardrums, they mess up your brain waves. So the music blared out from the living room speakers, not just through the whole of the main house, but out the open windows and all over Wits End. Upstairs, Hal had gone almost silent for a while after the UPS man dropped off a roll of chicken wire and 2 gigantic bags of plaster. The sign on his door that had once read Hal Applewhite, painter, now said Hal Applewhite, sculptor. But whatever he was sculpting with chicken wire and plaster, Hal had taken up hammering again, purely, Edie thought, in self defense. Sybil had turned up the volume on the white noise machine in her office and had taken to wearing earmuffs in order to keep writing her great American novel. Cordelia swore the sound carried out to the dance studio. Her ballet, she claimed, was changing from a discordant tragedy to something resembling a polka. Most days, Lucille stayed in Wisteria Cottage with all the doors and windows closed and the curtains drawn. She said it was the only way she could write poetry that didn't fall into rhymes like thread and bread, mitten and kitten. I see where she's going there. Edie figured it was the music that had sent Jeremy Bernstein out to the woodshop. He could do interviews with Zedediah and Archie out there, where the power tools overwhelmed any other sounds. It wasn't that Edie didn't like the music. She did, but the constant repetition had worn grooves in her brain. Even in those few blessed hours when Randolph took the CD and went off to Treybridge for what he called his eternal, unending, utterly futile auditions, there was no respite. The music kept playing over and over in her head. She would catch herself humming it, whistling it. It wasn't just the hills that were alive with this music. It was the trees, the grass, the house, the universe. Even worse, Jake had taken to humming it as well, so that if she did manage to drive it out of her mind briefly, he might bring it rushing back at any moment. Randolph Applewhite didn't very often direct musicals, and when he did, he usually went somewhere else to do it. Some other city in some other state. If he ever got this show cast, and if the family survived the rehearsal period, Edie was going to suggest they make a family rule against his ever again directing a musical from home. Partly to get away from the music and partly because it had become an obsession, Edie had spent a good part of the week in the meadow, by the pond, in the pine grove, anywhere, and everywhere on their 16 acres, looking for a great spangled fritillary. When she came back each day, the unused camera on its strap around her neck, her net empty, Jake's smirk seemed to get bigger and broader. Edie didn't give up easily, but she was beginning to lose hope. September was the last month they were supposed to be out there, and they were listed as rare during the second half of the month. There were only 6 more days in September. Uh-oh. Hope she gets that fritillary. It was beginning to look likely that the Butterfly Project would end with a gaping hole in the chart. It drove her nuts. The Great Spangled Fritillary was a common butterfly. The book said so. She should have found one weeks ago. It was just some nasty twist of fate that she hadn't found one. It was like a curse. If Jake Semple hadn't come into her life, she was absolutely certain she would have found one by now. But he had come, and then he challenged her. She told him that she would find one, and now if she didn't, Jake Semple would win. Everything else about the project was finished. The papier-mâché caterpillar, the chrysalis were sitting on a shelf in the schoolroom, painted according to the pictures in her book, and she'd scheduled the teaching opportunity about metamorphosis on the first of the week next week. She was going to explain to Destiny how the caterpillar turned itself into the chrysalis, and then she would cut the chrysalis open and explain how the monarch butterfly that she had a photograph of on the chart had climbed out of it and flown away. The teaching opportunity had a paper describing the project, and its results were what she called the culminating events. Her paper was almost done. It was just waiting for a paragraph on the Great Spangled Fritillary, or else the statement that she had to give up on finding one, a statement of defeat she couldn't bear to think about. There were no official grades at the Creative Academy, but Edie always graded herself on her projects. It gave her a sense of where she was, what she had done, and most of the time a comforting feeling of accomplishment. But without a Great Spangled Fritillary, she was going to have to give herself a B in science. For the first half of this term, she was not used to getting Bs. She worked and worked until she felt sure she had earned an A. This frillery thing wasn't something she could do by hard work. It was totally out of her control. Worse, she'd been so determined to find one that she had fallen behind in every other subject, including math. Her math tutor had sent her an email asking if she was sick. She was doing her best to catch up now, but the more she tried to concentrate, the more she was aware of the voice singing, "Climb every mountain." It filled the house, urging her to climb mountains, ford streams, follow rainbows. Suddenly, a new voice joined the one pouring out of the living room speakers. Jake burst into the schoolroom, singing at the top of his lungs that she should keep climbing and fording and following. Mercifully, when the final chord had died away, the CD ended and the house was suddenly silent. House hammering stopped with the music. Jake stood there smirking, his hands behind his back. Winston had come in after him and now flopped at his feet. "The song's right," Jake said. "About what?" "About finding your dream if you look hard enough." "Well, I wouldn't call it a dream exactly. Not mine, anyway. And there weren't any mountains involved. But I found it." With that, he brought out from behind his back a clear plastic box like the kind nuts and bolts came in. Lying in the box, its wings battered, its body shriveled, was a great spangled fritillary. "You killed it," she said. "It was dead when I found it. Guess where?" When she didn't guess, he told her anyway. "Stuck to the front of Archie's truck. Inside the grill. It must have been there for days, maybe even weeks." Edie stared at the battered insects. There was no mistaking what it was. She wanted to cry. This was this was almost as bad as ending with a hole in the chart. The Butterfly Project would get an A now, but it wouldn't really be her A. It would belong to both of them. Edie's a little too proud to share moments like that with people, isn't she? She can't handle the fact that Jake may have turned a corner here and he may have helped out. Of course, we all know Jake's not going to just take this line down. He's not going to be real modest about it. Now Jake's going to rub it in her face. Chapter 14. What's the matter with the girl? Jake thought. He'd saved her stupid project for her, hadn't he? So why was she so upset? She should have been grateful. All the way back from Treybridge, he'd imagined her reaction to his finding the lousy butterfly she wanted, and he might just as well have brought her a slug, a toad, a road-killed possum. That's what he got for trying to be nice. Well, he wouldn't let it happen again. Jake slammed the plastic box down on Edie's desk as Randolph Applewhite burst into the schoolroom and stumbled over Winston, who was lying across the doorway. Winston yelped and scrambled out of the way, but Randolph barely seemed to notice. "Who was that singing? Who was that singing?" He looked wildly around the room. "Jake, that can't have been you, was it? Was that you?" Jake shrugged. "Just now? I guess so. I was just singing along with that. Where did you learn to sing? And where did you get that magnificent voice?" "I don't know. I don't, never mind. Can you act?" Jake shrugged again. He had played a pumpkin in a first grade Thanksgiving play, but it hadn't required any acting. His teacher had given him the part because it didn't have any lines. She had been afraid of what he might say if he was allowed to speak on stage. "We'll find out tonight. You'll come to the auditions, and I'll have you read with Janine Ning. She's the only person I've seen or heard yet who could possibly play Liesel." Randolph took hold of Jake's shoulders and looked at him intently. His head cocked to one side. "Possible, just possible. Luckily, Janine's really small. Do you know Rolf's song?" "Rolf's?" Edie said. "Rolf! Jake can't play Rolf. Rolf's 17 years old. I know. Going on 18. You're how old, Jake?" 13. Last May." "Well, thank heavens your voice has changed already, and you're tall for your age. Rolf could be small. It doesn't say anywhere. Rolf can't be small. All the more reason he could he would want to join the SS to make up for being a runt. The psychology of it is perfect. Randolph let go of him then. It's an excellent part, a wonderful song, a little dancing, a romantic interest, and you'd be the source of all the onstage tension at the end. But I've never, it doesn't matter. You can sing, you have a strong, powerful voice, and you stay on key. Right now, I wouldn't care if you couldn't act your way out of a paper bag. You're smart enough. If you can't act, I'll teach you. I'll get you the script right away. And all these interminable auditions, I haven't found a single person who could come close to playing Rolf. Not one. And here you were all the time, right under my nose. With that, Randolph Applewhite left the schoolroom, humming Rolf's song to himself, slightly off key. A good thing he doesn't have to teach singing, Jake thought. Are you going to do it? Edie asked. What's it to you? Jake said. It was a question Jake should have been asking himself, but for some reason he wasn't. Randolph Applewhite wanted him to be in The Sound of Music. From the very moment he'd understood that, Jake had known the answer. Of course, he was going to do it. Because if you do, and if you dare to sing Rolf's song, or any other one for that matter, even once in this room while I'm trying to work, Jake wasn't listening. He was thinking. His heart, he noticed suddenly, was actually pounding with excitement. He'd never auditioned for anything. What if he froze up? And what would it be like to sing on a stage in front of a lot of people? He'd never done it before. And there was the acting. He didn't know for certain that he could act, at least not with a script and lines somebody else made up, but something told him he could. Now that he thought about it, acting was what he'd been doing all his life. He didn't know the show, really, but he knew the music. By now, there wasn't anybody at wit's end who didn't know every word into every single song. Randolph had asked where Jake had learned to sing. The weird thing was that until this very moment, he hadn't even known he could. Not really. Magnificent, Randolph Applewhite had called his voice. Magnificent. See, there's more to Jake. He's like an onion. You just keep peeling things back and you're finding out there's a lot to Jake here. Here we go. Chapter 15. Her father hadn't been gone 2 minutes before Jake started humming Rolf's song. Edie shut down the computer and stormed out of the schoolroom, her stomach churning. She had just started up the stairs to her room when the CD began again and the house filled with the opening notes to The Sound of Music's overture. Almost immediately, the hammering started up in Hal's room. Edie turned and went out through the kitchen, slamming the screen door behind her. Under the big beech tree near the barn, Lucille was reading to Destiny. Polly, from the porch of her grandfather's cottage, was shrieking with maniacal laughter, and the strains of Ophelia's death ballet drifted up from the dance studio. These sounds, along with the high, vibrant thrum of the cicadas, seemed almost to collide inside her skull with the music of the house. Now that she was out here, she didn't know what she wanted to do. There was no need to get the butterfly net and head out to the meadow. There were no more butterflies to find, and she couldn't do any other work unless she had went back to the schoolroom first to get her materials. Right now, she didn't care whether she ever went back to the schoolroom again. She didn't know why she was feeling the way she was feeling. For that matter, she didn't know what she was feeling, but she didn't care. Whatever it was awful, and she wanted to make it go away. She kept walking till she found herself at the goat pen. Wolfie had to be in the shed. Only Hazel was outside. She was in the corner of the pen, her head under the bottom rail, her neck stretched out as far as it would go, trying to reach a clump of weeds on the other side. Not so much as a blade of grass was growing inside the pen. The goats had stripped it clean. Their food trough was empty. Edie pulled up the clump of weeds by the roots and tossed it over the fence. Hazel pulled her head free, picked up the weeds, and began munching. Edie decided to get a scoop of feed for her and had just put one hand on the gate when Wolfie came thundering out of the shed, eyes blazing, head down. He tore past Hazel and crashed into the gate so hard the impact jolted Edie's arm clear to her shoulder. Fine, she said to the goat, who had now snatched the weeds from Hazel and was shaking them from side to side as if killing them. You can just starve for all I care, both of you. The lathe started up in the wood shop. Edie followed the sound like a trail of breadcrumbs. Maybe hanging out with Zedediah for a while would make her feel better. Zedediah could always make her feel better. Whoa, Nellie, her grandfather said over the sound of the lathe as she slipped in through the door. Who skunked your dog? What? He turned off the machine. I haven't seen anything as threatening as the expression on your face since I saw a tornado heading for the highway while I was driving back from the coast in a hurricane. That's a lot. There were 3 newly finished rocking chairs in the shop. Edie threw herself into one of them. Where's Archie? It was the one. Is he the one you're mad at? No, I mean, I'm not mad at anybody. Zedediah shook his head. Could have fooled me. Archie took the reporter kid down to the old highway bridge to do a little fishing. Fishing? Edie couldn't remember any member of her family ever going fishing. He bought a pole while he was in town, and they went out so he could practice. Seems when the television people come, they'll want to get some tape of us doing regular old country things to show that when we aren't making art, we're just plain folk. It's supposed to be good for ratings. Oh, Edie set the rocking chair moving. Easy, easy. You rock that hard and you're going to rock the chair right over on you. What's eating at you? Edie shrugged. Nothing. Zedediah brushed sawdust off his work apron and settled himself in another of his rocking chairs. Right, I can see that. Dad's going to give Jake a part in Sound of Music, a real part, with the song and everything. Ah. Edie frowned at her grandfather. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just Anything else? Edie wanted to tell him about the great spangled fritillary, but she couldn't. Just thinking about how it would sound stopped her. How could she be angry about getting some help? And then there's Jeremy Bernstein, she said. Why had she said that? How come he's still here? Because he doesn't have a pair of quarters to rub together. He didn't have collision insurance on that old wreck of his. He can't afford to leave. Somebody could buy him a bus ticket or something. Are you kidding? He practically worships the ground we walk on. Who among us can resist that? The kid's obsessed with art and artists. Besides, he's got a head full of projects he wants to do about us. First, the TV show. That's supposed to spin off into a feature-length documentary. Then he's planning to write separate articles about each of us and sell them to different magazines. Probably an article about the Creative Academy, too. And then there's his book. It's a good deal all the way around. He gets room and board and a place to work, and we get our own personal press agent. Zedediah rocked for a while in unison with Edie. She realized she could hear, ever so faintly, the music up at the house. She felt her hands clench into fists. So Randolph thinks Jake can sing, eh? Zedediah said. She nodded. I have something to tell you, and I want you to listen. Are you listening? Edie nodded again. I said, are you listening? Yes, I'm listening. All right, then. You, Edith Wharton Applewhite, have talent. Very real, very important talent. Just because somebody like Jeremy Bernstein is obsessed with artists doesn't mean that artists are the most valuable people in the world, or that art's better than everything else human beings do. Edie thought of her curriculum notebook, her project charts, her goals and teaching opportunities and timelines. I know that, she said. She knew that. He didn't have to tell her. But right this minute, it didn't make her feel one whit better. That's the end of chapter 15. Okay, so I feel like I connect with Destiny, but Zedediah is pretty awesome there. I really like him. He's a good grandpa. He knows that things are a little silly up there at Wit's End, but he's comforting to everybody. He wants everybody to be good. He wants everybody to be strong. He wants to prop up everybody's talents, whether it be the dancing from Cordelia or Edie and her very logical math and science ways, or Sybil and her writing, even though he didn't know she was writing this other book. It's great. Now, if only Grandpa could remember to do some shopping. Well, there's the next 3 chapters of our story. Tomorrow night, once again, at 6:30, I will be reading chapters 16, 17, and 18. Please join me in that. If you like this, make sure you have subscribed to this channel. If you think anybody else would like this, you think somebody else would like this story, please share this. Post it on social media. Let people know about this channel, Wesner77. But with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Stay safe out there, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.